Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It is good to see you all. Welcome. My name is Dr. Angeline Peters Lewis, and I have the privilege of serving as both the Chief Operating Officer at Barnes Jewish Hospital and the President of Barnes Jewish West County Hospital. We are thrilled that you're joining us for our first Leading Edge Medicine program this evening. And for those of you who are joining us virtually, we are glad that you decided to spend this time with us. Our Leading Edge Medicine series is an exclusive opportunity to hear firsthand about the incredible innovations and discoveries that are happening right here in St. Louis. And it's generous donors like you that make research progress and medical advances possible by giving our brilliant physicians and research scientists the fuel they need to make life-changing discoveries. Tonight is exciting because you're going to learn about the latest research directly from our panel of experts who are leading the way in breast and gynecological cancers. Before we get started, I wanted to recognize our foundation's board of directors. If you're here tonight and you have a silver tag, can you stand so we can just recognize you and celebrate you for all the work that you do? Sincere thanks to our dedicated board members for all you do on behalf of the foundation, the hospital, and the community. Tonight, Dr. Sheila Stewart, Premal Thacker, and Dr. Lannis Hall will show how they are significantly improving outcomes for patients with cancer and how they are proactively addressing health disparities. These panelists are truly pioneering all stars in their own respective fields. And I'm going to introduce our speakers now. Dr. Lannis Hall is Vice Chair of the Clinical Research Committee, as well as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion in Clinical Research at Siteman Cancer Center and Medical Director of Radiation Oncology at Siteman Cancer Center at Barnes Jewish St. Peter's Hospital, and is the Clinical Trials Leader for the program to eliminate cancer disparities at Washington University School of Medicine. Dr. Hall completed her medical degree, internship, and surgical residency at Howard University and completed an additional residency in radiation oncology at Washington University School of Medicine. She holds a master's degree in public health from St. Louis University. Dr. Hall is a tireless advocate for cancer awareness, screening, and clinical trials. Dr. Hall speaks frequently on the radio, in schools, churches, and community groups. She's everywhere. She's also the founder of the Prostate Cancer Coalition, which is dedicated to raising awareness about prostate cancer in high-risk men, and she even developed a podcast dedicated to this topic. We look forward to hearing from Dr. Hall. Dr. Sheila Stewart. Is the Associate Director for Basic Sciences at Siteman Cancer Center at Barnes Jewish Hospital and Washington University School of Medicine. She's also the Vice Chair of the Department of Cell Biology and Physiology and Professor at WashU School of Medicine. A cancer biologist, Dr. Stewart is the first person to hold the newly created vice chair position, and she has been instrumental in recruiting additional faculty to expand research. Her lab is focused on understanding the tumor microenvironment to limit breast cancer progression. Dr. Stewart received her PhD in microbiology and immunology from UCLA and completed her postdoctoral research in cancer biology at the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research at MIT, my hometown, Boston. Dr. Premal Thacker, yes, the Queen's Wave, is a director of Gynecological Oncology Clinical Trials and is the inaugural David and Lit Much Distinguished Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology at Washington University School of Medicine. She graduated from the Medical College of Pennsylvania and joined the Obstetrics and Gynecology residency program at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Before coming to WashU Medicine in 2007, she completed a master's degree in cancer biology at the University of Texas and her gynecological oncology fellowship at MD Anderson Cancer Center. Dr. Thacker has initiated and led numerous national ovarian and endometrial cancer trials as the principal investigator. In addition, she has served on multiple committees of leading organizations, including the Foundation for Women's Cancers, the National Cancer Institute's Ovarian Task Force, the NCI Gynecological Task Force, and the National Comprehensive Cancer Network Task Force for Genetics, among other things. It's important to point out that much of the research you're going to learn about this evening is possible because of donors like you and the foundation at Barnes-Jewish Hospital. So thank you for your generosity, and we hope that you see that your investments have not been in vain. And so on behalf of the patients this research is helping, we offer our scientists and our colleagues a huge thanks. Now, without further ado, get ready to be amazed by the brilliance and breakthrough ahead. And remember, you'll have a chance to ask the researchers questions following their presentation. So let's get started by welcoming Dr. Lannis Hall.
Good evening. I wanted to thank the foundation for inviting me to share our outreach work and our programs. It truly is an honor because I'm very passionate about it. But I wanted to begin by first reminding ourselves of the distinct commitment that we have as a comprehensive cancer center. So I thought I would first show these three directives. The first one, because sometimes we forget this, is that we must develop cancer control programs and outreach to our catchment area and includes people who are underserved, poor, and difficult to reach. Our second directive as a comprehensive cancer center is that we must provide cancer care to communities in our catchment area that are high quality, so much so that they can't be found in neighboring cancer centers. And then finally is the unique directive of having to offer clinical trials to our patients, for which we have 500. And this directive is quite unique because we must not use cost as a barrier and must show proportional representation for our catchment area. So our catchment area is 2 states, 4.8 million residents over 80 counties, and 21% self-identify as minority, about 4% as immigrant. In yellow, if you can see it, we have 5 satellites, and then we have implementation and science collaborators that include Southern Illinois and Poplar Bluff Regional Medical Center, and all the way up north to Decatur Memorial Hospital. So this table explains, it looks like it's easy, but it is actually a lot of data. It first shows our demographics for rural, medically underserved, and minority populations in our 80 counties, which we must tabulate. And that is our catchment area. And then the Siteman Cancer Center demographics are our cancer demographics from our main campus and all of our satellites. And then our treatment trials are what we try to align and mirror, first our Siteman Cancer Center demographics, and ultimately our catchment area. So our clinical trial representation should be representative of who is in our catchment area, whether they are medically underserved, minority, or rural. And as you can see in our treatment accruals, we're not quite there, where our treatment accruals are about 16%, but our Siteman Cancer Center, who comes through our doors, is about 18%, and our ultimate goal is 21%. And that is what we are held to by the NCCN and the NIH. And so we have to do an evaluation and develop programs to support clinical trials. And let's understand why. Well, we all have heard that clinical trials are necessary for the advancement of our of all of our advances in screening, diagnosis, and treatment, and that is true. But patients who participate on clinical trials actually do better. They have improved outcomes. So we want to offer clinical trials. And over 90% of the patients who participate on clinical trials say they would do it again. And so their satisfaction rate is high. And so we have every month evaluations by department, by disease site, whether it's breast or prostate, by the satellite, making sure our satellites accrue, and by developing research and support programs for our faculty around best practices. In addition, we have to acknowledge the difficulty of recruiting certain populations on the clinical trials. There are historical injustices and barriers and mistrust that make it difficult to recruit populations. And so that means if we're going to really serve our communities, we have to have outreach activities and partnerships that are long-standing and transparent. And in the dark blue circles are all the things we do, from education to podcasts to articles to partnerships with our cancer advocacy groups like the Empowerment Network and our outreach initiatives. But research and clinical trial accrual is not our only goal. It really all begins with education of our communities, and through that education, empowering them to prevention, early detection, and screening. And this is where I would like to share one of our key challenges in one of our most common disease sites, prostate cancer, and the programs that we've developed to improve it. So prostate cancer is the leading cause of cancer death, a second leading cause of cancer death in men, and the most common cancer diagnosed in men. And if you look at that middle bar that's jetting up very high, that is the incidence rates in dark blue, and in light blue are the mortality rates. And in that large bar, it is showing African American men with a 70% higher incidence rate of prostate cancer. And in the light blue bar, it is showing the mortality rate, which is 5 times that of Asian Americans and over twice of white non-Hispanic men. So by far, nationally, this disparity in incidence and mortality is like almost no other solid tumor. In our region, in St. Louis City and in St. Louis County, it is no different. The mortality rate for African American men is 2.5 times greater than that of white men in the county, so 150% higher. And in the city, it's 2.85 times greater, or 185% higher, the mortality rate for African American men compared to white men. And thanks to our St. Louis County Health Department, they have displayed this mortality by zip code. And this is the county, and up north of the graph is North County, and in dark blue is the higher mortality. So those zip codes in Blackjack and Jennings and Ferguson and Florissant are 2 to 3 times higher in mortality than West County and in South County. So to give you a historical perspective of this, over the last 50 years, in green is the top part of the table, and blue and red is the lower part, but this is displaying mortality over time. And since we have been documenting differences in mortality by race, African American men have had twice the mortality rate. But what you should notice is things have improved. Starting in about 1990, for all men, the blue curve, the red curve, and the green curve have all dropped by 50%. This was at the same time that we instituted a simple screening tool called PSA, which takes about a teaspoon of blood, costs less than $100, but gives you a snapshot of the health of the prostate gland. And because of the institution and wide adoption of PSA, we found that there was a stage migration. There are no early signs and symptoms of prostate cancer, so you did not know you had it until you had back pain and it spread to the bone or you had a spinal cord compression. Well, now we were diagnosing prostate cancer at curable stages. So as our treatments improved and our screening improved, our mortality dropped. However, PSA was an imperfect tool. There was a lot of controversy with this simple screening test because it's not cancer specific, it's organ specific. So what that means is you could have an elevated PSA if you had a big prostate gland. You could have an elevated PSA if you just had a little inflammation. So what did that mean? Many men were getting biopsies unnecessarily because they had an elevated PSA but no cancer. And some men, more importantly, might have clinically insignificant prostate cancer. This was prostate cancer that was not going to shorten their lifespan at all, but yet it was diagnosed. We call it low risk. So because of that screening controversy, there was confusion about whether we should screen. And then came two studies, one from Europe that had over 150,000 people in it, over 7 countries, and showed a clear survival advantage for men who were screened. Concurrently, we had the PLCO study here in the United States that unfortunately was fatally flawed. It was contaminated in that over 85% of the usual care arm was screening with PSA, therefore disturbing any distinction between the groups. Second was that less than 5% of the clinical trial participants were African American. And these are the participants that would have most benefited from screening. Despite these flaws of contamination, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force that provides guidelines for us all weighed heavily the results of the PLCO study, and because of those results, decided not to recommend screening for any man in their lifetime anymore. This was in 2012. And that is where you saw many primary care physicians pull back and not screen for prostate cancer. What happened at Siteman was we were outraged, some of us, not all of us, but many. It was a big debate. And we developed a coalition called the Prostate Cancer Coalition. But the main reason to do it was because we wanted to educate our physicians to the problem with the clinical trial, the fact that it was flawed, and that there was a larger study that showed a clear advantage. More importantly, many of you all know there have been incredible advances, and now we have 3T MRI, and we have different biomarkers, so you don't have to just rely on the PSA. Anyway, we went to over 50 gram rounds across 2 states to educate primary care physicians, developed a protocol for screening that we delivered to other primary care physicians, pinned articles in national journals, and then also went to lobbying Congress, hopefully helping to change these guidelines. We did a church campaign, and I want to give all praise to Dr. Bullock, who has been my partner for years in this, and we spoke to 150 churches in 3 years. The task force changed its guidelines in 2017, but the damage had been done. These are national screening rates since 2010 to 2020. They've dropped from 54% in 2010 to 33% of age-eligible men across the nation in 2020. And what makes this so tragic is for African American men and men with a family history, high risk, those numbers had dropped to 20%. So we developed a health maintenance reminder, an electronic chart. And the health maintenance reminder is in anybody's electronic health record. So if you have a primary, they have a health maintenance section that asks, did you screen for certain things, for diabetes? Did you give a shingle shot? Did you screen for lung cancer if it's appropriate? But it was never, did you screen for prostate? That was not in it. We implemented, after about 1.5 years of a lot of lobbying, to have it implemented across all 10 BJC hospitals. And it was effective starting June 10th. Notice COVID was April 2020, and that is why you see that drop in PSA screening. After the implementation in the health maintenance record, across all of our 10 hospitals, screenings increased 50% when you compare 17 months before to 17 months after. And now, from 2019 to 2024, our screening rate is now 95% higher for all men. Every hospital system, regardless of rural, urban, or suburban, showed an increase in screening, some more than others. All racial and ethnic groups showed an increase in screening of at least 90%. Our screening rate, remember, it was 33% across the country. Missouri was 33% in 2020. Barnes-Jewish Hospital was 34%, and we're now at 48% screening rate across all 10 of our hospitals. Our big concern and the hesitancy was that would we increase the rate of clinically insignificant prostate cancers by increasing the screening by 95%. And if I had a pointer, I would ask you to go to the column on top, which shows low risk, and we did not increase the risk of clinically insignificant prostate cancer at all. The biopsy rate did not go up at all. And why is that? Because people now get not just a PSA, they get a 3T MRI, they get a 4K score, ExoDx. These are biomarkers to help determine who needs a biopsy or not. But where's our problem still? This is a zip code display of our metastatic disease as diagnosed by our tumor registry. And notice again, North County, and you can kind of see all of the region where our highest stage 4A and 4B or metastatic patients are in 63003 or Ferguson, Florissant, Cahokia Hills, and down in North St. Louis. So we continue to have work to do. And our current and our next steps are to expand our screening to our FQHCs that have asked, how did you do this? We want to do this. Please guide us in this way. And to our Siteman collaborators, SIH has now developed and implemented this screening program, and we just talked to St. Luke's because we share. This is our catchment area, and this is a better way to treat men. Educate and equip providers to develop targeted educational materials because some primary care physicians still don't believe in screening. And then finally, our free screenings. Notice that this is for people who have a primary care physician. Let's be real. Some people don't have a primary care home. Some people don't go to the doctor. So how else are we going to help them but offer free PSA screening initiatives? And we have a large one in North St. Louis, in North St. Louis County. And then strengthen patient support because our patients need navigators to help navigate the healthcare system. So thank you very much.
Good evening. I also want to add my thanks to all of you for being here, and it's hard to follow that act, but I will do my best. So what I wanted to do today was really just give you guys a sense of, how I use your money. How did we actually get from some of the really cool ideas my students might have had and really move to where we are today, which is the initiation of a new clinical trial. So I always like to start my talks by telling people what I really want to focus on is why does getting old stink in the context of cancer? And the reason that we've been so interested in this particular question is right here. Whether you like to read charts or not, all you need to see is that those lines go up very quickly in the 5th decade of life. What are those lines? Those are the incidence of cancer. If I could stop aging in the 4th or 5th decade of life, none of us here would need jobs. Unfortunately, all I've got for you right now for the aging is a lot of denial. But the question is, what is it about aging that doesn't cause a small increase over time in cancer, but we see these rapid increases in cancer in that 5th decade of life? The answer is a really complicated one. Cancer is a complicated set of diseases. My group focuses on breast cancer, which in and of itself isn't just one disease. It's many different diseases. And most people that study the very basic foundational causes of cancer know that adult cancer is primarily driven by mistakes in our DNA. We like to call those mutations. But it's not just one, it's not just two, it's many. And you might not be aware that every one of your cells has a construction crew inside there that fixes mutations when they show up. But every once in a while, you know how Clayton Road, anybody's been driving them and trying to fix that hole forever? Sometimes you miss a mutation and they slip on through and they start to accumulate over time. And so we know it's going to take time to go from one mutation, a few, to really what would concentrate the recipe for cancer. People go after this looking at sequencing. So we know mutations are important, and this is actually what it takes to drive a normal cell to a cancer cell. You need to get those mutations. This is real data off to the right here. This is in the skin, but if I looked in somebody's breast, if I looked in someone's prostate, what it's showing is that the older the person was when they checked, the more of those mutations you have. This is just part of life. It happens. So one of the answers to why does it take so long, if you will, to get cancer is you've got to get enough of those mutations. And I'm here to tell you today that I don't care about them at all. That's not what we think about in my lab. It turns out that there are more things that are happening in our bodies as we age that we think contribute to cancer. One of these is the accumulation of basically old cells. The technical term for them is senescent cells. This is just, again, data saying that the older you are when you look, the more of these cells are there. Why do I bring these up, and why should you guys care about it? I've said once already, I'll say it twice, we focus on breast cancer. And so it's easy to think about any cancer as a big ball of tumor cells, right? It's just a bunch of tumor cells. But that's not what a tumor looks like. A tumor has a lot of cells in it. It has cancer cells in it, but it has a lot of quote-unquote normal cells that are part of the whole functioning. If anybody went to the bathroom today, you were probably quite happy when the toilet flushed, right? Tubes got to take stuff out. If you needed to get a drink of water, we had to bring water on. We have electricity. In other words, we have blood vessels that bring things in and out. We have behind these beautiful white walls, or these nice walls here, there's struts holding up this building. Those are cells we call fibroblasts. They actually create the mechanical components that hold our bodies together. All of these cells are inside a tumor. And the question you have to ask yourself is, in addition to those tumor cells, do these other cells actually enable a cancer to grow? And we have focused for a long time on those fibroblasts, those cells that create the mechanical structure that hold this building up if this was a body. The reason we're so interested in these cells is basically, if you take a cell that kind of sort of wants to be a tumor, it started to go down that road, and you mix them with some of these older cells, it is enough to take a non-tumor cell to a tumor cell. In other words, you got a pretty nice teenager, starts hanging out with a lot of junkies, turns into a drug addict. Really, things go bad, right? And so being in an environment that enables these cells to grow actually can accelerate, at least in our models, and we can find these cells in humans, the ability to form a tumor. So these cells can be bad actors. They can be enablers, if you will. How do they do that? I like to tell people they make everything yummy you can imagine if you're a teenager. Whether you're talking candy, you're talking burgers, whatever, these cells dump out the food, if you will, that drives these would-be tumor cells to really grow and eventually form that tumor. Many years ago, we had this really interesting idea that maybe we could understand why these cells were making all this food. And scientists aren't always the most creative. We ended up working on a protein called P38 because that's how big it is. But what was really interesting about this is we found out that if we could block it with drugs or our little fun genetic ways of doing things, we could actually stop those cells from making all of those foods that can push tumor cells to grow at a much faster rate and even progress to a metastatic lesion. So does it actually really work? Can I show you some real data? We have different ways to measure tumor growth. In this case, we're looking at a mouse, and all those colors mean there's a lot of metastatic tumor inside that mouse. And what we could show is if we block that P38 protein from making all of those yummy foods, if you will, we could limit that tumor growth to the same extent as what I have up there as PTX. That's paclitaxel. It is still used up to the third or fourth line of defense for a metastatic breast cancer. I'm not going to show you data because you don't care, but I'm going to tell you, and I hope you believe me, we went on to do all kinds of experiments to show that that drug is not touching a tumor cell. It's touching all those other cells and stopping them from making that food. This went out to be a paper. All of this work was actually supported by the foundation. So this was a crazy idea we had. It was when I was very junior. I didn't have the data yet to get one of those NIH grants we also desperately need. And it was really foundation money that let us kind of play with this idea that was a little bit out there and show that these cells were critically important. This is how we look at survival. The farther off that lines go off to the right, the longer the mice lasted. And what I hope you can appreciate is when we use that inhibitor against the non-tumor cells, the mice survived just as long as if they were on standard of care. So this really was an interesting idea, but this is one of the reasons I love grad students so much. My student came running into the lab and said, "Sheila, you're not going to believe it. When my mice are on the drugs, they're so happy." And I was like, back up there. What makes a mouse happy exactly? And she's like, no, they're just jumping around a lot. And it got us thinking about one of the problems that metastatic prostate, as well as breast cancer and many other patients who have metastatic disease of the bone suffer. They can get spinal cord compressions, extreme pain, hypercalcemia. They can also have high levels of fracture. Once you fracture a bone when you're under chemo treatment, things tend to go south in a real hurry. And our mice were running around. They weren't actually fracturing their bones like the normal mice that were on chemotherapy. This is a way to look at bones. We were able to realize that we were actually protecting the bones and slowing the cancer down. This, again, was the data we needed to really start partnering with our clinical partners and ask, is this drug something we could use in a person? Could we slow the tumor growth down and protect the bones by targeting those normal, old, bad enabling cells, if you will? And in fact, that's exactly what happened. We actually had the funding from the DoD. Again, if we hadn't had the foundation funding, this wouldn't have happened, to write a clinical trial with Cynthia Ma and Catherine Clifton. So basically, we wanted to ask one more question. And again, this is now from NIH funding, but it was the foundation that got us going there, which is, it was nice that we could get these mice to live longer. But how do you get them to live longer? How do we push that curve further out to the right? This is where we go and do some of those dorky scientific ideas. I'm not going to describe them to you today, but we had a whole lot of reasons to think we could push that curve to the right by yet again going after non-tumor cells. I'm not going to show you how we did that, but what I'm going to tell you is a picture is worth 1,000 words. I hope you can appreciate the two mice there that don't have any color. They have no cancer in them. What we were able to do was to couple that targeted drug, that P38 inhibitor, with an immunotherapy. This is something that has changed the lives of 50% of melanoma patients. It's made it a cure. And by making that combination, we could completely cure these mice of metastatic disease. That's the green line up there. These mice are alive and show no evidence of recurrence. All of this started with a crazy idea with a graduate student and finances from the foundation. This is how long it sometimes takes. Like as I said, we had this crazy idea in 2006. We did a whole lot of different things that just kept us going up the chain, if you will. And finally, we launched our clinical trial January 31st of this year. So what is foundational science? People like to use the iceberg for a reason. There's a lot of things that we need to understand about what it is that causes cancer. Because if we can understand the different cells that become enablers, if we can understand how to modify the immune response, if we can get under the water and understand this, we can come up with novel approaches. I said the word immunotherapy. Immunotherapy has changed the trajectory of many cancers, yet many, many cancer patients are not yet getting the benefit of immunotherapy because we don't understand their entire iceberg. So basic science, foundational science, if you will, lets us go from the crazy cells, the crazy mice, understand how they enable these tumors to grow, and provide us targets in which we can potentially combine with either already established therapies or even novel therapies to make a real difference, not just in the lives of mice. In the end of the day, I don't care about them, but really importantly, patients. And get a clinical trial. And with that, the most important people are the ones who do the work. My students, they're amazing, and I'd like to thank you for your attention.
All right, well, thank you. This was a great foundation for my talk because I'm going to sort of bring it to the home of where clinical trials make a difference in our community, not only here locally, but nationwide. And all this really work is done because we have foundational support to help our clinical trials. Because I wish I actually put a picture of my team. I have 14 team members who get some of the support basically from the foundation. Because as Dr. Hall mentioned and Dr. Stewart is mentioning as well, is it takes a lot of efforts to get a patient also through a clinical trial. So I'm really grateful that I'm sort of the last person to speak because it's given me a good foundation to speak about this. So I'm going to speak about immunotherapy and the advances that we made in endometrial cancer and ovarian cancer. So these are some conflicts because I do a lot of drug development. And then I just want to put it in perspective. Ovarian cancer has approximately 21,000 women who will be diagnosed with ovarian cancer. However, we will lose about 14,000 women this year alone. So it's really a deadly disease because we don't have a good prevention yet. We're all trying to work on that holy grail. And the standard of therapy has not changed forever. It's really giving chemotherapy and surgery for patients. And then now with the advent of what we call PARP inhibitors, for certain patients who have a molecular signature, we're able to help sustain that response that they have and hopefully get them into remission permanently. But we really do still have a lot of work to come about. So one of the things is immunotherapy, and I'm so grateful that Dr. Stewart said how long it takes. I've been actually working on an interleukin-12 molecule with the help of a company because of the fact immunotherapy is really a big word. There's lots of different things we need to target. A lot of you probably have heard of immune checkpoint inhibitors with Keytruda and Opdivo. It's all like advertising to the public all the time. But there's really lots of ways we have to stop our immune system to help engage it, to really help the cancer cells get targeted so we can take the brakes off and let our immune system really be augmented. So there's two types. There's an innate immunity as well as acquired immunity. And luckily, IL-12 is one of those cytokines that can actually bridge both. So one of the things that I've been able to work on, thanks to having Protected Time with the foundation, is actually working on this trial where we give Immunon 001, which is an IL-12 intraperitoneally, because ovarian cancer really affects the abdominal and pelvic cavity. And so giving the treatment to where the disease is really makes a lot of sense, in addition to giving chemotherapy as well. So I led the national trial for this called Ovation 2. It's actually going to be an ASCO plenary this June, which is like a great way to try to hopefully get us promoted to our phase 3. But it really was a novel trial that 50% of our patients end up getting chemotherapy first to try to shrink the disease chemically before we go ahead and do a surgery. However, what we did is randomize patients to get this intraperitoneal IL-12 to work in conjunction with chemotherapy immunotherapy given weekly in order to truly try to get the immune system both locally in the tumor microenvironment to be really rising up above so we can kill more of the cancer. So we didn't see the side effects in our bloodstreams. So, that's where some of the people have been looking at using this molecule because we know it's such a powerful cytokine, but it had too many side effects before. It would cause fevers, it would cause people to get hospitalized because of it. But now that we can give it not intravenously and actually directly to the tumors, we're able to really help minimize the side effects, but get the drug to where it needs to help the body do what it's supposed to do, take care of the cancer. So what you can see is that we actually found an overall survival improvement of approximately 16 months. This actually has been advanced, and I can't, because of embargo, tell you. But when you talk to a patient about an overall survival benefit of over a year, that means that we're making really incremental improvements. Because up until now, what we've really seen is that we haven't had home runs with immunotherapy. So this is really important because this is in an all-comer population, so we're not just looking at molecular subtypes, but we're really trying to include all of our patients because we want personalized medicine for patients, but we want to be able to include every patient. It's really sad for me as an oncologist to look at a patient and be like, your molecular signature does not fit this or does not fit that. We want to give opportunities, and that's really what the foundation dollars help us do, is by opening all these type of trials that can sort of be fitting for our patients in our community. So going on to another trial we were able to present just recently, last week was our national meeting. Dr. Powell, who's one of my partners, was looking at using the immunotherapy of pembrolizumab in conjunction with olaparib in patients with standard chemotherapy. And this trial randomized patients to 3 different arms. It's not really as important about those arms, but what I want to show you is that really we could only see that there's a benefit of adding immunotherapy with olaparib to a certain part of the population. So unfortunately, this is a large phase 3 trial that immunotherapy in terms of checkpoint inhibitors did not work. So it is important to know that sometimes these smaller trials, these unique trials that we're able to bring to our community can be more successful than a lot of these larger phase 3 trials. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to actually see that if you take the checkpoint inhibitor versus chemotherapy, those lines are really just look one on top of the other. So sometimes when we think we have a novel drug or a big pharma company thinks they have the next home run, sometimes it just isn't the home run. But we need to keep offering and getting better, and that's where these foundation dollars are so much of a benefit to us. So what have we done for recurrent endometrial cancer is really the statistics are daunting. We have almost 70,000 women who will be diagnosed with endometrial cancer. There's definitely a disproportion in terms of ethnicity and how our patients do with endometrial cancer, and this is a global crisis. This is not just a United States problem. Every country in this in the world has this issue, and we will also approximately lose 14,000 women to this disease. So this is going to gradually overcome even ovarian cancer because of the incidence and the prevalence of this. So we really need to make bigger strides in terms of our treatments. So we've been very fortunate that we've led actually 2 very large national trials here using checkpoint inhibitors with a combination of chemotherapy for our patients with recurrent endometrial cancer. And what we were able to find is that we could make a huge difference for our patients based on their molecular signatures. So for what we call mismatch repair deficient patients, which are patients that have this abnormality that's an inability to repair sort of their DNA as properly, is that you can see there's this huge separation of the curves. It's like what I like to tell our trainees. You could drive a Mack truck through those 2 curves. You can see how far separated they are. So we really think we've actually are able to maybe cure women. But once again, that's about 30% of our women. So we still have work to do. But what you can also see is that they also have this issue with the all-comer population, that you can see that there's still an improvement, even if you are mismatch repair proficient, to get chemotherapy along with the immunotherapy. And the overall survival also demonstrates that this is a meaningful survival benefit that we can get for our patients. So this led to 2 New England Journal Medicine papers that we were fortunate to actually lead here at Siteman. And so in 2023, this really changed what we would consider the standard of care. So it's what I want to say is the impact that we make here in the community really goes nationally. So these dollars and foundation is really so important to our patients. And I'd also like to target that Dr. Hall and I collaborate and conspire together, because we really try to increase our diversity, because we also know that there is this huge disparity of women who are African American women who also have come to us with a more advanced stage. So we're trying to collaborate on education in our communities and coming up with working with the first ladies in the community to try to work with them to educate, because we really want to let patients know that their menstrual cycle should never come back, because I would love to never hear that again. It should always, once you lose it, you should lose it for good. You should never have any vaginal bleeding. But it's interesting, we don't have that education. And as Dr. Hall mentioned, a lot of patients don't see a primary. They don't even see an OBGYN. So we're actually developing a screening tool with one of our fellows to try to educate about all gynecologic cancers, because we realize there's this huge gap. So we would love to see a stage migration, because we had diagnosed patients earlier as opposed to advanced stage.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. At this time, we are going to take questions.
We were told we had to put our feet on the white thing, so we were just making sure where we're supposed to be.
And we will bring the microphone to you.
Very quickly, very quickly.
Thank you. Gracias for the fantastic presentations. Dr. Hall, when you look at Hispanics, do you classify them? Because not everybody is.
In terms of incidence and mortality.
Well, and then people in Puerto Rico are different from Argentina and from Mexico. So do you have subcategories there?
We do not.
Thank you.
We don't. If you look at our guidelines and the way we report out, it's reported as minority, Hispanic, or non-Hispanic, and they don't subcategorize. When we look at that, when we call it an ethnic group, not a racial group, and when we look at that particular incidence and mortality for Latinos and Hispanics, it really falls a little bit higher than Asians, who have the lowest incidence and the lowest mortality of prostate cancer. And the incidence is actually a little bit less than white non-Hispanic men. So their mortality is actually lower, but not as low as Asian men. Asian men by far have the lowest incidence of mortality for prostate cancer. You're welcome.
Dr. Hall, just a follow-up question. With regards to if you look at what you need in terms of your research, in addition to additional funding, would it be a help to have individuals that can reach into those underserved communities to kind of promote your research and draw that in line with your funding need?
The only way to really move this type of research forward is with partnerships, and partnerships with people that are trusted in the community. For example, we have the Empowerment Network, which is a long-term cancer advocacy group of prostate cancer survivors. Many of them have participated on clinical trials. They lend a voice that physicians just don't have in terms of trust in the community. But in addition, we have partners like the Urban League, but also churches. And I want to spend a little bit of time on that. Our First Ladies, which are the wives of pastors. There are 32 First Ladies of St. Louis that we work with, and they are being trained to become health equity ambassadors. Health Equity Ambassadors is a training program by the American Cancer Society on prostate, colorectal, and lung, and the importance of clinical trials. They will then get materials in their church that they can display in the foyers of their church, but we also will be doing screening programs, and it's supported by an American Cancer Society grant. That is all so helpful, to have a church home that you can go to and be screened in a safe place and be educated in a safe place. So those are some of the partnerships, but it's essential to have those partnerships.
Hi. Sorry. I guess I have to stand up. In terms of the immunotherapy, is there a differential with respect to the different cancers that therapy targets? In other words, prostate versus endometrial, for example. Is there any stat that you can share regarding that?
Yeah, so, immunotherapy, as Dr. Stewart mentioned, has made dramatic, when we say immunotherapy, we say immune checkpoint inhibitors, but I want to say there's lots of different types. So I mentioned one cytokine called IL-12. There's also CAR T therapy, which is really trying to get the T cells augmented. So there are different, I think, overall we have a lot to learn about different sort of signatures, because for instance, ovarian cancer is for a long time known to be something that should be very responsive to immunotherapy. And when we did these large trials, we've had now 3 of them looking at checkpoint inhibitors with chemotherapy, and they've all had sort of not great results. We've all been like, oh my gosh, why hasn't immunotherapy worked? So I think what we have to also realize is there is a lot of work to be done of what sort of cells come into the tumor microenvironment, because there's natural killer cells, there's T cells, B cells, and what is that signature?
And I might add to that, it's becoming clear in the solid tumors particularly that those other cells I was talking about influence the ability of these different immune cells to come in and really influence the ability of these different types of immunotherapies to be effective. CAR T cells are very effective in certain types of leukemias. They don't work at all basically in the solid tumors. But there are reasons for that, and just like they didn't work in the beginning against liquid tumors, there are ways to get there, and that's the foundational science.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you very much for that very informative information that you gave us. My focus is on prevention. I'm really interested in any kind of trials that are going on about foods, dietary supplements, vitamins, like different things that are out there in the media as far as that goes for preventive. Also, second question is, did AI help you at all through your research?
So I could take a little of that.
Sorry.
That last one's a loaded question, by the way. I just want to be clear about that. So the answer is yes, there are studies in prevention for sure. At WashU, in breast, I can tell you one specifically that look at something called age, not my kind of age, but something that happens to proteins, looking at what you're actually consuming and how that might affect progression actually within the breast cancer setting. So there are different ones, and we certainly could get you information if you had a specific cancer type you were interested in. AI is a moving target and has actually only existed for, 18 months? So not yet. I think where AI is going to probably make its first big impact is really, for example, again, going to breast, lots of women get mammographies, and you look for certain things, but there are patterns in that the human eye just can't look at 10,000 of them and find it. And so they're really trying to use AI to start looking at existing types of ways that they're screening patients, say, can we find patterns that the human brain just isn't picking up on? I think that'll be the first place we see the bigger impacts. But that's my personal feeling. My 2 colleagues on the other side may give you a different answer to that.
No, I actually agree that we've been using computer-aided detection and mammography for a while, and AI is just another step of that, because one thing that we all get very concerned about is people who get mammograms every year, but despite having annual mammograms, they then develop a lesion that's over 2.5 centimeters, and they were just there. And so what was it about that screening and the visualization that just was not ideal? And why was that cancer missed? And AI is going to help us with that.
I think another great place AI is going to help a lot is with pathology. Looking at even an H&E slide, there's probably like other cells that we don't focus on, that looking at that will give us like signatures, because we also had to realize with the technology, we need to make sure we can get it to everybody. So, you know, not everyone can get precision medicine, even in the United States, sadly. So these might be other ways to try to help, you know, get equitable care and also cost effective. In terms of prevention, we have a surgical prevention trial because ovarian cancer, since we don't have a good sort of screening tool, we actually are offering women who are at a higher genetic predisposition to get their fallopian tubes removed, because we think most ovarian cancers start actually in the fallopian tube, and we're participating in that. But that's going to be a 3,000 woman international trial in order to prove that that would be a great strategy, because lots of women get tubal ligations or use something like that for contraception, and instead of just getting part of your tube removed, actually remove the entire tube. In terms of actually about supplements and things, I actually think a lot about that, not from a prevention, but how do we also get better outcomes for our patients when they are diagnosed with cancer. So we're trying to make a good prehab model where we're going to actually in ovarian cancer as well as endometrial cancer, because we do see a lot of women with advanced stage, look at exercise, nutrition, look at a more comprehensive role, because I don't think it's just one part. It's just not just nutrition or just exercise, and also looking at the psychological well-being, because I have a whole nother talk of where I actually look at stress biology and ovarian cancer progression, and so there's lots of things we could do that are not necessarily always medically directed in that sense.
We do have a question from one of our online viewers. Dr. Hall, your education program in the Hazelwood School District showed positive impact around breast health. How do you plan to continue this education, and what do you envision for the future?
Well, thank you for that question. Whoever stated it. So Hazelwood School District has 3 high schools in North County, Hazelwood East and West and Central. And we have a partnership with Hazelwood where we provide breast health education to 9th through 12th graders. And at this point, we have educated 7,000 young ladies through 9th and 12th grade. And this gets back to the importance of prevention. Starting at the age of 25 now, our National Comprehensive Cancer Center guidelines, as well as American Cancer Society, the American Society of Breast Surgeons, all recommend that women have a risk assessment of whether they're high risk or average risk for breast cancer. Because if you're high risk, then there should be further testing to determine if you should begin screening before the age of 40, possibly as early as 25. Many women will pass the age of 25 and not know that they need to have a risk assessment, thinking they just need to get to 40. So starting that education early, particularly in high-risk women who have an earlier age of onset of breast cancer and double the mortality between the ages of 35 and 45. And in St. Louis County, the mortality for African American women between the ages of 35 and 45 is 350% higher than white women in St. Louis County because of the earlier age of onset and the increased percentage of triple negative, a very difficult to treat breast cancer. So the high school girls have responded to this education. They have had absolute gains of knowledge of 30 to 40% in all of the domains that we treat, and a 98% satisfaction rate. And from that, we are expanding to our other school districts, which is Ferguson, Florissant, and Jennings. So the next step, would be to broaden this, because our catchment area is 82 counties, and I just said most women don't know at all that they should have a risk assessment by the age of 25. So all women need to learn this. So how do we amplify this message and make sure that our high school young ladies across all of our counties understand this?
Thank you. We are going to take one more question. However, these ladies will be available after the program to answer any remaining questions.
I think we're going to have to argue. We both want to ask a question. First of all, thank you. You have spoken to me in ways that I can't even tell you, and motivated, inspired. To you, Dr. Stewart, one of my a question I have is, I've been reading in headlines. I haven't delved too much deeper because headlines make me nervous, but that many young people, particularly with colon cancer, there's a higher rate of colon cancer in that demographic, that young age, and I was wondering if you had any way to explain that. And to your point, that would be important to go into high schools and to express the importance of those types of screenings.
So we're definitely seeing spikes in younger populations. Colon cancer is probably the biggest one, to be totally honest, as well as pancreatic cancer. The answer is we don't know what's driving it. The answer is also probably it's many factors. Clearly the obesity epidemic has been linked to it. Now, that doesn't mean it's a cause, but there are a number of people at Siteman that are looking into this, both at looking at patient populations, but also trying to build the models to understand how some of these things could affect it. But we do not know the answer. But it does underscore the importance of the things that Lannis is talking about, which is getting these risk assessments and getting people when they're younger to just be paying attention to these things and ask, am I the person who needs to be availing myself to these opportunities for screening?
Very good. Well, thank you so much for the wonderful.
Thank you very much.
We'd now like to welcome Board Chair Mahendra Gupta for closing remarks.
Wow. This is amazing. I never thought that listening to a presentation on cancer, you can walk away feeling optimistic, inspired, and have the tremendous faith in the future. Give another round of applause. And to all of you, this goes to your credit too. As you heard from our doctors, that foundation support has been instrumental, especially in that early research, early stage clinical research. If you look at Siteman Center and the foundations, the seed fund, basically it has a leverage of 1 to 12 or more. That is, every dollar that comes to the foundation, it enables researchers to develop their research to get much larger grants from NIH or other places. Without that, many of the research that gets done probably may not get done. And so thank you to all of you, because you, on a daily basis, enable to change the future for many people and our community collectively. I am Mahendra Gupta. I am the chair of the board of Foundation, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this event, staying here and asking the questions, some very pertinent and important questions that, and our speakers will continue to be here for some time to engage with you. And Dr. Stewart, Dr. Thakur, and Dr. Hall, thank you very much for taking time to join. The research you're doing is remarkable. As I say, wow. It is that part that, and it is about that when we look at you, you never give up. You never give up because the cancer, we cannot give up on cancer. At Siteman Center, the director, Dr. Eberlein, says that in his lifetime, he wants cancer to become a chronic disease, not a terminal disease. And that's what is important, and we can't do that without the continuous effort of researchers and doctors you heard today. It's again going back to what I said earlier. It's your dollars at work. Your gifts are transformational, and many times you don't know, but when you hear the researchers like what we heard today, you realize how deep the impact of what you do through the foundation. We are so fortunate in this city that we have Barnes Jewish Hospital, one of the top 5 hospitals in the nation in terms of its size, scope, connected to the medical school, Siteman Center, where world-class research on cancer and many other modalities is being conducted. I always say that if you want to get sick, be in St. Louis. So on behalf of all the patients who have identified themselves, and as Dr. Hall, you talked about all the patients who have yet to reach forward and get the treatment and diagnosis, and all the researchers, your students who on a daily basis look forward to their future and changing the world. I want to thank all of you, but also to our doctors and speakers. Now get ready. We have got some important events coming up, but one of the most important is the Illumination Gala. It is the yearly celebration by the foundation recognizing the community that supports the cancer research. And we are going to have absolutely a wonderful, wonderful event that is coming up. You'll have more information either already sent to you in the email or the other mail information, but make sure that, that you mark it on your calendar. And of course, the bar is open, the food is still served, doctors are also here, and each of you engage in a discussion because your questions may give them an idea to ask a research question that they may not be thinking about it. Again, thank you very much for coming and enjoy the evening.